There goes the exit. He never even gets back to Pharaoh. We don't get the plagues. Moses, you're not even a name. Mary and Joseph, they flee to Egypt, right? Well, I have an orange light here. I'm not sure what Egyptian immigration law is, so not sure you can get in. All right? But then they try to come back with this baby named Jesus. Did he have a birth certificate? Did he have any identity? Sorry. Who do you think you are? And then, this is the fourth Sunday in Lent, so if you haven't read all your lectionary readings yet, at the Pool of Siloam, they're trying to figure out who this guy Jesus was. And this is John 9, 29 through 30. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. Big no-no. Immigration law. If you don't have papers and know where you're from, we assume you're an immigrant and you're out of here. All right? So just think of that, folks. No gospel story. We've got nothing. So, that's the not-so-good news. A couple of minutes here before I finish, and then I just want to say a couple things to the DREAM Act. Part of that was to dream. We have this law that says, under the 14th Amendment, that came out of the Civil War, came out of the Dred Scott, one of the worst decisions ever, that says if you're born in this country, you're not property, you're not Dred Scott, you're not a slave. If you're born in this country, you have the rights of a citizen. Right? And the Supreme Court in Collier v. Doe 30 years ago said, children of undocumented have a right to public education. But that only goes up to high school. So we give them this remedy, we get them educated, we get valedictorians, we get all kinds of people, and they can't go to college. So we do the DREAM Act, we say, let those people get educated. They will be among our most productive citizens. 8, 9 years, it never passed. Always lost by 3 or 4 votes. Someone said it's like ice and fire. The people that don't like immigrants thought it was too generous. The people who liked immigrants said, well, if we just enact one part of thing to get these people in, we won't be able to do all the other things, so we're not going to vote for it. And so we didn't pass a DREAM Act. And again, we've educated these kids through high school, we've done all this work, and what happens? They're stuck. So the problem is now, the political climate, we're not going to get a DREAM Act. Right? Rebecca's asked me a few things. There's just not a lot of luck in Congress right now for getting anything positive. Right? People think we're being overrun. I think Mark's numbers show we're not. Right? People think the law is generous. I hope my sense is, in some ways, 1 million people is generous. In other ways, we are extremely myopic in what we're doing. And so one of the things for hope in dreaming is perhaps we can do some things administratively through the executive office of the president. We may not be able to get through Congress, but there's a lot of discretionary things that perhaps we can encourage our administration to be a little more generous about immigration. So I encourage you to think about that. I can talk more about that in the questions and answers and that sort of thing, in the kinds of hopes. So thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I do not have a PowerPoint. I don't teach anything related to immigration here, at least not yet. But what I have been asked to talk a little bit about is theological ethics and how it relates to immigration. I'm going to talk primarily about Catholic teaching on immigration and the work that the Catholic Church is involved in. But I've had the opportunity to speak on several occasions with a rabbi and a Muslim scholar. And I'm finishing up a book that Craig contributed to where we're looking at Islam, Judaism, socially engaged Buddhism, and Christianity. And basically, any religious teaching throughout the world is going to be in line with the rest of the teaching. Whenever I'm speaking on any panel with anyone from any religion, we all say the same thing. Now, part of what Craig talked about is why. If you look at particularly the Abrahamic faith traditions and the main figures in all of those traditions, the phenomenon of migration is central to most of the stories. So we have, Abraham and Sarah, Jacob, the book of Ruth, we have the Holy Family. So Christianity and Judaism in particular, but also Islam, will have a very strong teaching about the requirements of hospitality. Now, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam also are worldwide institutions or worldwide traditions that do not see themselves as limited to the nation-state system, which is another reason why they're all going to pretty much call for the same thing. So there are 4 main areas that I want to try to quickly cover. Immigration is so complex that it's really hard, as you can see, for everybody to just do 20 minutes because one thing Craig didn't mention is if you know anything about immigration law, our immigration law system is more complex than our tax code. And if you think about, the attorneys that you have to hire and pay just to deal with your tax situation, our immigration code is more complex. So a few things to highlight out of Catholic teaching that I think are particularly important. The first one is what I was alluding to as an international institution. One of the main teachings of the Catholic Church is that the human person precedes the state. So we have a nation-state system that we've set up to organize ourselves in the civil sphere and politically speaking. But the human person and the human community come first. We're prior to those constructions. So there's a belief that any discussion about a person is about whether or not that person is able to flourish in his or her own life. So the primary way of talking about a person is not whether or not they're documented or undocumented or what their status might be, employment authorized or not, but is that person able to flourish in a community that is able to also flourish in part because that person is a part of it. So this whole sense of the human person preceding the state is important for migration, but it's particularly important when we talk about people who are undocumented, because oftentimes their undocumented status is the primary way of categorizing them. So the church would counsel against that. The Catholic Church focuses on 5 main rights that they believe every person has. The first right is every person has the right to find opportunity in his or her homeland. If you look at research on why people leave their homeland, the vast majority of people move because they have to. They're not making a choice to move, they have to move. And the Catholic Church sees human dignity, which is one of its main teaching, that our dignity comes in part by the community that we're brought up in. Our language, our culture, our religion, the way in which we worship, all those are part of who we are. And that in order to flourish, in order to seek one's fulfillment, it's often primarily within one's own community. And if you're forced to move to another culture, another language, another socioeconomic system, another employment system, that generally speaking, for that particular migrant, your human dignity is often diminished, in large part because of the lack of hospitality that migrants receive by the receiving communities. So the first right is that people should have the opportunity to seek their own survival, their own basic needs, and ultimately their own flourishing within their own homeland. The second right is if you're not able to realize your own human flourishing within your homeland, you have a right to migrate in order to support yourself. And this relates to that whole concept of the human person preceding the state, that a person being allowed into another country should not be denied that entry solely because they may be considered a public charge, as Craig mentioned, or the very long list of reasons why people are denied entry to the U.S. So people have a right to migrate. The third right is that sovereign nations have the right to patrol their borders. Sovereign nations have the right to create a system by which people can enter.